Hi friends, today we will talk about global distributed delivery and what are some of the challenges which are typically involved in global distributed delivery. The topic by itself is quite vast, so I'm breaking this series into a series of subtopics. In each specific video, I will cover one subset or one area of global distributed delivery. In this particular video segment, I'm covering project management complexity as an area of challenge or as an area of focus for global distributed delivery. The first challenge which we typically see and encounter is the siloed planning. This becomes specifically true not just because of the distributed nature of the delivery, but also because there are multiple practices which are coming together in any large project of decent size and revenue. You'll find that there are multiple practices coming together, and when I say practice, it means a practice like technology, marketing services, data engineering, data science, or consulting or managed services support, site reliability engineering. So one or many of these practices might be coming together, and what we have seen is that there is a tendency to plan in isolation, especially in the beginning phases of the project. And what it leads to is situations like all the assumptions which are taken by different practices are not consolidated and put in a single place. That becomes a single largest challenge which we have seen typically occurring. So one of the important thing which needs to be done when planning for such projects is to document all your assumptions across practices, because these different practice teams are sitting in isolation or sitting in geographically distributed places. Your assumptions might get fragmented, and when you actually start executing the project, we start forgetting what those assumptions were, and they are not easy to locate or find. So having all your assumptions being documented is important. Having cross practice representation in the planning is very important, for the same reason that there needs to be awareness in terms of how that planning is happening. All the practices need to be in the single same page, and there shouldn't be any surprises. More specifically, within design and build, we have seen that there's a very close collaboration which is required, because design gets implemented, and when we are implementing the designs, there could be some changes which are required on the design, some updates which are needed, the visual QA which needs to be done by design teams, which leads to cross dependencies. For the same reason, content teams typically will have a dependency on the build teams and vice versa. If, for example, if you start with the dummy content, which is not reflective of the actual content, you might land into challenges when you are doing your build processes. So siloed planning, avoiding siloed planning becomes really critical. Moving to the second aspect of the project management complexity is defining project success. Now, this is also very critical when you're starting a project. Understanding what are the key success parameters for a project, especially from a customer's perspective, is very important. To understand what are those business KPIs, or what is going to move the needle for the customer. It's not just about executing the contract, getting those features and functionalities done in the project, but it's also about how these features and functionalities are going to impact the top line, bottom line of the customer, and how they are going to impact the life of the end user of the customer is very important. They will not only help you to make the project successful, but it will also help your team to feel that sense of purpose while they're working on this kind of a project. Moving ahead, the next challenge which typically comes in is handling scope creep. Now, even for a non-global distributed delivery project, handling scope creep is a challenge. But in this particular case, because the teams are geographically distributed and there are multiple practices which are coming together, there is multi-layer complexity. There is pockets of information which might get lost. Information might be fragmented, and therefore not having a good documentation of all the decisions being taken, decisions being agreed with the customer, can lead to very painful scope creep discussions with the customer, in which customers don't agree that certain things are change requests. Therefore, it is very important to keep all the teams aligned in terms of what is the agreed scope, so that later on, if there are any changes, the logs are maintained about those changes by all the practices, by all the teams, into a single central repository, so that handling scope creep becomes really important. User stories not in one place is another challenge which typically comes in the project management complexity space. What we have seen is that different practices will have a tendency to create their own user stories. They will either tend to create separate projects or even separate out, or even if the project is common, they might separate out their epics, which means that tying all these practices into one coherent workflow or piece of work becomes really difficult. And therefore, it is always advisable that you are using a common Jira project or a common Azure DevOps project. You have common epics, and under those epics, then you can create your practice wise user stories, but tying them all together into a one view, which is like also some kind of a visual representative view out of those user stories is really, really important. The next project management complexity area which becomes critical is being non-productive at the start of the project. This is one area which typically gets ignored is the customer onboarding time. When you are onboarding your team members, they need to be really onboarded into the customer's onboarding environment, onto the customer tools, their Git. You they typically might require VPN access. A lot of customers want developers to use their development environments or even virtual environments, their laptops, etc., which can have onboarding times from ranging from 1 week to as long as 3 weeks, or in some cases it could go to four weeks as well. So when you are planning your resources and when you are planning your budgets, factoring in onboarding times for globally distributed teams which are spread across geography, across practices becomes really critical. The next topic within project management complexity would be late breaking issues during build, which means that if your design team after completing design is rolling away, similarly if your content team after creating content strategy and content is rolling away, and when you move into your design build phase, during build phase when your design and content issues start showing up, it's important to have voice of the design team and voice of the content team available. So we always advise that there is some allocation of design, content, and some of the other teams which are always maintained during the course of the build phases. One voice for all the tracks, which essentially means that there needs to be a uniform technology and product voice which is covering all the practices. It should not be that different practices come and sound like different practice in front of the customer. There needs to be a product manager kind of a function which is like unifying all the practices in terms of the customer. So that becomes important. Thanks for watching this part. In the next part, we will talk about another area of the global distributed delivery. Thank you. Thanks for watching.